Vijay, let's talk about this story. Sepp Blatter talking about moving the World Cup 2022 in Qatar to the winter because it is too hot this time of year to play the World Cup in Qatar. And obviously, air-conditioned stadiums might not be enough. I think this is going to cause a lot of damage in the business world. I want to hear from you what you think companies will think about this possible move. I mean, I think a lot of people will not plan a vacation or a trip to the World Cup in the middle of the winter. The transfer market, clubs, you could go on and on. Give me your perspective, Vijay.
Well, it's interesting you use the word damage. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying damage. There'll definitely be upheaval, that's for sure, but damage remains to be seen. But given the fact that we're dealing with a lot of time in advance of that World Cup, there's opportunity for anyone that's affected to alter their schedules and alter their budgets to account for the change in the schedule. But, I mean, off the top of my head already, I can think of a number of different factors, not only from the World Cup or FIFA's partners, but specifically also from the European domestic leagues that will be affected by the change in the scheduling. So, I mean, where do you want to begin?
I mean, but this I don't understand why he would decide this now that it needs to be played in the winter before it was awarded to Qatar. They must have known that the temperatures were like this, in the summertime. They must have taken that into account, even though we know that, money talks and the rest walks, and it had to go to that region because it's never been to that region, and that's fine and dandy. But the weather is what it is. Why would now all of a sudden he decide to think about moving it to the winter?
Well, it's interesting you say money talks, because in this case it seems money talks and people don't make any sense because of the money. So it's interesting how in a Reuters story, Blatter had mentioned that they never really accurately or comprehensively thought about the heat factor, and it made me wonder, well, how could you not think of that? I mean, look where you're bringing the World Cup to. So it kind of baffles my mind as to how they could award the World Cup to Qatar and not even consider the heat as a factor, which makes me wonder, I guess perhaps the money was just too good.
Yeah, but what's confusing is this, Vijay. Not too long ago, not even about a month ago or so in Israel, if I'm not mistaken, the under-21 championships were held where Spain beat Italy in that final. And we understood that the temperature there in Israel was stifling as well. And in the Middle East, the temperatures are really excruciating right now. Why would they even decide to do this, to decide to change it to the winter?
Well, it seems like after FIFA has finally wrapped its head around and finished counting its money, that they decided to look at the issue and say, wait a second here, we're starting to get some concerns and some comments from some of our television partners, some of our corporate partners, and even from fans that, wait a second, this is going to be problematic because, from a TV standpoint, we're now going to have to alter our television schedules. How is that going to affect our broadcast commitments to the other properties that we broadcast? From a fan standpoint, well, we want to experience the World Cup and revel in it the way that we'd like, but we can't do that when we're in stifling 50 degrees Celsius heat. And then from a sponsor standpoint, sponsors want to be able to activate, meaning to execute their sponsorships to try to reach the fans and the consumers. How are they going to be able to do that when it's so hot and people are not wanting to be outside, where a lot of these activations like to take place? So from that standpoint, it's going to be problematic not only for sponsors but also for fans and also for FIFA's television partners, who now in the cases of all of these three parties, they'll all have to make adjustments, and it may not be easy.
You're bang on, because you know from the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, I know from the 94 World Cup in the USA, a lot of things happen outside of the stadiums where there's soccer festivities, all sorts of things going on outside before the game, hours before the game. And if it's going to be, in the high 30s, early 40s, it's going to be stifling for people even to bother to be outside.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at FIFA's 6 major partners, which include the likes of Coca-Cola and Sony, etc., a lot of these companies invest significant dollars into their partnerships with FIFA, and a big part of the benefits that they get from that partnership is the opportunity to what is called in the industry activate, meaning to execute that sponsorship on site at the venues in the host countries. And if fans are deterred from even attending the World Cup simply because of a threat of the heat and the health conditions, or the health that will come from those kinds of conditions, then they're going to not get as much return on their investment, because there won't be as many fans, there won't be as many people experiencing those particular products and those particular brands. So the partners then are going to be up in arms and saying, wait a minute, we're not getting the return on our investment, so we want some kind of compensation for that. And obviously FIFA doesn't want to return any of that investment back to those brands because they pay a significant amount of money.
Last point is this, Vijay, and then we'll let you go. I think if this happens, I think this will not be one of the most attractive and entertaining World Cups we've seen, and I'll tell you why. I think players will be spread too thin. Too many games early on in their domestic leagues. Too many things on their mind about transfer markets, about a Champions League, about league titles, you name it, injuries. You can go on and on where everyone has it in their mind. Everyone works it into their schedule. Things happen in a certain way when it's a World Cup year. They know it's in the summer, and that's how it's going to be. Is this going to play into a lot of players and coaches' minds?
I definitely think so. I mean, the CONCACAF Gold Cup is one of my favorite. Is actually probably my favorite tournament. But I'd like to think, well, not like to, but I have a feeling that this particular version this year is a lame duck tournament because of the fact that we're not seeing the A teams at the tournament. That's disappointing as a fan of that tournament. And I'm not sure if Michael Lewis has touched on that in his interviews with you. But just like the Gold Cup this year is sort of a lame duck tournament, could the World Cup in 2022 be a lame duck tournament? Because again, when it's the club teams that pay the salaries of players, not the national teams. So from that standpoint, are we going to see then players beg off of playing for their country, even though many of them like to do that? It's an honor for them to represent their country. So they have to. You're right. They have to consider that fact. They have to consider the avoidance of injuries, and that's just from the player standpoint. But even from the business standpoint, companies that are investing in those various domestic leagues in Europe, they're going to pretty much have to sit back for an entire month, while perhaps maybe some of their competitors steal the spotlight with the World Cup happening during the course of the winter.